So today, I want to get back to the Easter story and expand a little bit on the message that we heard last week. And before we get too far in the Easter story, I just want to review, because in order to understand what happened on Easter Sunday, you have to understand what came before. So on Friday, remember, before this story happens, Jesus was arrested. He was tried as a criminal, publicly tortured and humiliated, and then executed. And he died. So imagine, put yourself in the mindset of his followers. They love him more than anyone else on the planet. They've given up their lives to follow him. They believed he was going to save Israel. They saw the crowds on Palm Sunday who were chanting his praises. And now, just a few days later, he's dead. And all of his followers are in hiding. They're wanted. They're in fear of their lives. And then Saturday, they're just absorbed in grief, trying to make sense about what happened. Can you imagine the regrets they had going through their minds? They probably just felt like fools. Like, what were we thinking to believe? The whole project that they've been doing for the last 3 years is just for nothing now. Everything is hopeless. And then comes Sunday. Even under the weight of this heavy, heavy grief, some of Jesus's female followers go to the tomb to anoint the body. Even though they haven't slept in days, even though their hearts are broken, even though life seems hopeless and pointless now, even though there's going to be a huge stone blocking them from the tomb that they aren't strong enough to move, still, they show up and they're ready to do the only thing they can to show their love and respect to Jesus. They go to anoint the body. And what do they find? A miracle. Now, the details of the miracle are different depending on which story of the Bible you read. If you remember, in Mark's version that we read last Sunday, they get to the tomb and the stone is already rolled away. And they enter the tomb and they speak to a young man who tells them the good news. But in Matthew's version, which we read today, the stone is still in place when they arrive. And there's a violent earthquake, and they watch as an angel comes down, rolls the stone away, and sits on it. In this version, there are guards who witness the angel as well, and it's the angel who delivers the good news. But either way, the tomb is empty. Jesus is resurrected. Death was not the end. God has done something completely new. And they realize that a whole new story of joy and hope and wonder is beginning. Now, if it bothers you that these two books of the Bible disagree on some of their facts, if you're wondering, well, which version is true? Did the women see the stone rolled away? Did they watch it happen? Or was it already rolled away when they came? They can't both be true. Then you're thinking about truth in terms of the facts, like the physical reality facts of the situation. But if you remember, this is what Dwayne was explaining last week. Stories have a different kind of truth. The Bible is not a bunch of facts. The Bible is a bunch of stories. And the truth of a story does not always come from how or whether it literally happened. What matters is what the story teaches you and how it transforms your life. So a story can be deeply, powerfully true without being factually accurate. Jesus knew this. This is why he taught in parables. So don't get too hung up on the facts and miss the truth. Right? The point of the story. And what I want to do today is dig a little bit more into the truth, the underlying truth that the Easter story expresses and how it applies to our lives. So I don't know about you, but sometimes lately it feels to me like everything is falling apart in our society and in our world. I mean, you know, for all of us, it's probably different things that are particularly salient, but I mean, I'm seeing Liz Cheney holding our democracy together by a thread. Major news media outlet that can just outright lie to their viewers, and then when they get caught, the viewers don't even care that they've been lied to. They're just mad at people who have pointed out the lie and told the truth. There's no affordable housing in our state. The Armory and the hotel programs are closing. There are going to be hundreds of people back out on the street. Where's the outcry? Who's doing anything about this? Healthcare system in our country is falling apart. Mass shootings, so common that nobody even notices. It's the blip. Hate crimes on the rise. I mean, what happened? How did we get here? Where are we going? It just seems like a huge, scary mess these days. But because we're Christians, when we find ourselves looking around and thinking everything's falling apart, we can recognize where we are and say, oh, I know what this is. This is Friday. This is the part of the story where things fall apart. But we know that Friday is not the end of the story. Amen. We know that God is still working even though we can't see it. And we know that if we can be like those women, if we can show up and do the next right thing without losing hope, that Sunday is coming. Sunday is coming. Easter is on its way. Resurrection, new life, something better can still spring forth. In our individual lives, too, we go through times of severe trial. I bet there are people today who feel like you're at the end of your rope. And if you're not, if it hasn't ever happened to you that you felt that way, that's awesome. Someday it will. It might be the death of a child or a parent or any dear loved one whose loss makes you feel like you can't go on. It might be a rock bottom experience when you realize that your addiction has cost you everything that mattered in your life, and you look around and say, what's the point? I've lost everything. Your car breaks down, and then because you don't have a car, you lose your job, and because you don't have an income, you lose your housing, and you feel like everything you've worked so hard to build has just crumbled away. For me lately, it's my job that's been falling apart. I've been working almost 20 years at my health center, and my plan was to work there for at least another 15. I'm a primary care doctor, so the relationships that I have with my patients, the history that we have together for so long, it really matters. But more and more of our staff are quitting. We can't find replacements. The phones don't work. The computers aren't working. They're doing my job, but it's becoming more and more difficult. Sometimes it seems impossible. It frequently feels hopeless. But here's what the Easter story teaches us. Do you remember the example that Dwayne gave last week when he said there's two different kinds of belief? There's intellectual belief, like I believe that the earth is round. I believe that the rope bridge in front of me is sturdy enough to support an adult person's weight. And you can believe in Jesus that way. You know, I believe that Jesus was resurrected from the dead and rose again to sit at the right hand of the Father. I believe. But a much more powerful type of belief is, what do you put your trust in? Will you walk out on that rope bridge? To trust in the Easter story is much more than just to believe it intellectually. As Christians, when we trust the Easter story, that means that no matter what our Friday looks like, we never despair, because Sunday's coming. We know that on Saturday things might seem hopeless, but things are never actually hopeless. So I keep showing up to my job, and I keep doing the next right thing. It might seem impossible, but with God, all things are possible. So you keep going to meetings and living one sober day at a time. It might feel like everything you've worked for is crumbling away, but we know that, and we trust that God is at work, and a new thing is coming on, is already underway. No matter how devastating the loss, no matter how intimidating the circumstances, we can look and say, I know what this is. This is Saturday. And while we know that we may grieve, we never despair, because we know that Sunday's coming. And we know something else because of the Easter story. We know that Jesus is alive in the world. We can talk to him. We can ask him for help. He can invite him into our hearts, and he'll guide us. He says, I am with you always. So we will still go through Fridays and Saturdays in our lives. But let's not get stuck there. Because we know that God isn't stuck. Whether or not we see it, God is at work. Jesus lives. So with that trust in the Easter story, may we be like the women who showed up at the tomb that day. Even if it seems that everything has fallen apart, may we keep taking the next right step, walking forward in faith together, showing up to do what little we can, ready to be surprised by joy, ready to witness